All right, I'm currently on the phone with Danny. He's another musician that reached out about the current interview session. So I'm going to go ahead and give him the chance to introduce himself.
Everyone, I am Danny Lloyd. I am from Mankato, Minnesota. I was originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then moved here about 10 years ago and have been working in the field of psychology. But I also have a side project where I work on music and sort of building this unique music experience where it's heavy into like concept album type stuff and trying to build that into a career eventually.
Awesome. Very cool. I'm sure we'll get to that. I always like to kind of start these interviews back at the beginning. So tell me some detail about when you kind of first encountered music and what about it was important to you.
Yeah. So when I was in eighth grade, at my church, they decided to put a church band together and for the youth group, and they basically just gave me a bass and said, "This is what you're playing." And I said, "Oh, okay." So in eighth grade, I started playing with them, and I started playing bass. And I before that, my brother had a guitar, but I had never really played, and I never really took lessons. So a lot of it was just sort of noodling around on a bass, and I kind of figured it out as I went through it. But that was really my first experience with playing music. Up until that point, I listened to a lot of stuff like Linkin Park or Sum 41, Coheed and Cambria, sort of things like that.
Yeah. And so it sounds like a lot of it was kind of started in the church and then progressed from there. Did you take private lessons as well?
No. So a lot of my learning was, it started out where I would just try to learn stuff by ear, and I did okay with that. And then I figured out how tabs worked, and I used a lot of stuff from like ultimateguitar.com and stuff like that. But a lot of it was just learning by ear. I never took formal lessons. People always said I was holding the pick wrong, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm just holding the pick the way that I think feels comfortable to me, and I still do. I hold it with like my middle and ring finger at the same time, and it's kind of weird, but it works out fine for me. So I think some of those like stylistic things kind of maybe came out differently by not taking lessons, but I think it's been working out pretty well for me.
Absolutely, whatever works. So you mentioned that a part of your learning process was doing tabs. Would that be for like contemporary music, or was it like church rock music kind of thing?
So as far as like the music that we played in church, most of that stuff we had like sheet music for that just had like the names of the notes above it that I was supposed to play, because I can't read music at all. But I figured out where the notes were on a bass, so I was able to do that fine. But as far as like the tabs, we didn't use tabs for that. A lot of the stuff with tabs was me just like learning songs and things that I wanted to learn independently. Like one of the first things I wanted to learn when I started picking up guitar was "Welcome Home" by Coheed and Cambria. It has like a really cool intro riff. And like that was a big deal when I was first able to play that. We would sit on like the front porch of our neighbor's house, and I would just sit there with an acoustic guitar and just like play the intro of "Welcome Home" over and over again.
Awesome. So where did that kind of progress to? Did you start at some point wanting to create your own songs and working with other musicians? You mentioned that you were very kind of heavily concept influenced. So tell me like how you kind of went about the creative process.
So one of the biggest influences for me is Coheed and Cambria, who's another like concept artist. They have like 10 albums out now that's all in this sci-fi universe. And it was a big influence for both my brother and I. And when I was just getting into high school, my brother was just getting into college, and we started writing our own sort of like concept album, where we started working on like storyboarding stuff for it, and writing music for it in sort of this progressive alternative genre. But that's where a lot of like our influence came from, and it's still the current project that I'm working on. It was on hiatus for many, many years, and it sort of has changed a lot as far as the story and direction of it over the years. But that's where a lot of the influence came from. And there's some other bands too, like Alisana, which is more of a heavy metal band that's in sort of the concept artist realm, and a few others like the Deer Hunter and Protest the Hero as well.
Okay. So tell me a bit about the appeal of the concept album over, an ensemble of, just a collection of songs.
Sure. Well, I guess I've always been very story driven, and I think it's sort of a way for me to tell my story while sort of trying to connect to people through something that's another form of media like sci-fi or dystopian type genres and things like that. And the world that we're creating with our current project is like a steampunk dystopian universe type thing. And all of the characters in it, a majority of them are some sort of like reflection of myself, or commentary on like growth and development as a person or how people interact in relationships and things like that. So for me, it's sort of like I'm sort of hiding behind the fiction a little bit, and it's sort of like a glimpse of myself through this fiction. Um, but I have found that it's a very fun way to tell stories and sort of grow a brand. In that we just wrote our first book for one of our songs, so we have like a 40-page short story that's out for it now. And we have another series called Tales of the Clockwork, where it's sort of like a true crime storytelling episodic type thing that all takes place within the universe. So it gives us a lot of opportunity to sort of branch out in different forms of media, especially when, like music, a lot of times people just listen to on Spotify or they go to YouTube, and it's sort of like this free thing now instead of something that's more of a commodity to be bought and sold. So I think it gives us a lot of reach and opportunity as far as growing as a brand.
Okay, so the story you're trying to tell, essentially what you're saying is that it encompasses more than just the media of music.
Yes. And the music is always been sort of like our primary thing. We're almost done with our first album. We have like 5 songs from it already released. And it definitely is still sitting in like that progressive alternative genre, but there's definitely a storytelling aspect to it. Like some songs have pieces of dialogue in it or like characters talking. So there is definitely like this storytelling element to it. And we try to bring a lot of that into our live performance as well. Because I've spent a lot of time like making video and syncing up video with our backtracks. To make sure that there's kind of like this cool live experience where people can kind of feel like they're part of the story. But that's a lot of the sort of influences and sort of the vibe that we're going for through our music, and as far as like our live performances too.
Okay. On that note, you mentioned live performances. What do you kind of anticipate for after the release? Do you want to get out and start doing shows and tour, or continue the story with more recordings? What's kind of the plan?
Yeah. So we already have a couple. I mean, we've played a couple local shows in the last couple months, and we have a couple more things coming up through April and May. But once we have the album solidified and ready to go, we're going to start trying to reach out, book some more shows. We already have some really good connections with people in town in Mankato where we live. And some other good connections that branch up into Minneapolis as well to try to get some shows and try to get the outreach a little bit more up into that area. But as far as a performer, I'm much happier as a performer than sort of like a recording studio type thing. And as far as like recording the record and getting all that stuff done, it's 100% a DIY project. I have a little bootleg recording studio. Was fairly cheap, low budget. But everything as far as the recording, the editing, the mastering has all been like a huge learning process on my end. As far as figuring out even like EQs and trying to compression and all the stuff that goes into editing and mastering these tracks so that I can get them something as professional as possible with essentially spending as little as possible.
Sure, definitely. It's also very nice to be able to be in control of the actual sound design, doing it all yourself as well.
Definitely.
Awesome. Tell me about some of your favorite memories that you have from participating in music, whether it was when you first started learning an instrument or now when you're, getting into the nitty gritty of recording audio.
Well, I mean, the first band that I was with, the church band, we ended up traveling quite a bit. That the name of that group was called Ananiosis, and we did end up in Canada at one point, and we didn't have much of a plan going in. We had where we were playing shows and stuff, but when we first got there, the transportation for all of our equipment was about 2 hours behind us, and the equipment got stopped at the border, and Border Patrol wouldn't let them through because our guitarist had his guitar case locked, and because they couldn't open it to check it, they just like halted all of our equipment at the border. And it just turned into this big mess of us trying to like get back to the border to try to get our stuff through, but also be on time for where we needed to be that day. Um, that whole thing was quite a fiasco. And then after our shows that we were playing there, we didn't have any like places that we were staying. We were just talking to people afterwards to see if they would like house us up. And so often we were pretty split up because there was about 15 of us. But there was one night where this guy was like, "No, I can take all 15 of you." And we were like, "That sounds a little sketchy, but okay." And we followed this guy for like an hour and a half out into the middle of nowhere. And we just assumed we were now part of a horror movie. And luckily, he just happened to be like the owner of like a huge construction company in Canada. And he had like this huge place out in the middle of nowhere that he kept us up in. He cooked us moose steaks at like 1 a.m. And then we stayed in his basement that had like a whole bar and a sauna and like all of this crazy stuff in it. So that was really cool.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Totally random. Would it ever happen again? Probably not. But that's always a good memory from like the early times of us playing music and sort of traveling together. But as far as recently, I think when we first, something really memorable for us was when we first put our first song together when we were recording it. And it was kind of like before that, we were just kind of some people making music, maybe playing some acoustic stuff at open mics and things like that. But to actually hear it in a recording and coming back, it was kind of like we were finally putting our ideas on paper, so to speak. And just hearing that play back was like a really cool experience of like, maybe this is something that we can actually push through and do, and try to make this into something that's more than just some friends playing music together.
Sure. Yeah, that's very cool. On that note, once you guys get everything together and start, getting out there to perform the recordings and everything, where can people find you and then follow you?
Yeah, so we are on pretty much every social media. We have a TikTok account. We have Instagram. You can find us on Facebook under Rise of the Clockwork. Same with all the other social media links. It'll all be under Rise of the Clockwork and Rise of the Clockwork on YouTube. We have a website called riseoftheclockwork.com that has all of our released music already, but you can find it all on Spotify and YouTube and Apple Music and all of those places. And then on the website as well, we have access to either like the digital ebook version on Kindle of the book that we have out that is part of our story. Or there is soft cover versions of it too that people are able to order through the website as well.
And I'll have you send me all those links and everything so it's easier to navigate to them. Cool. So I always like to give the person I'm interviewing the opportunity to put out their last word. So what's a message that you have that you want to share with people?
I think the biggest thing for me is like, don't give up on your dreams. I'm 31 now. And this has been sort of something that's been lingering in the back of my mind since I was in high school when my brother and I first started working on this sort of idea of a project together. And I think it wasn't until like the last couple years where I took it really seriously. And I've seen us grow so much. And I think if people have the passion for something and they have a vision, it's going to get hard at times. And there's going to be times where you're kind of like stuck in a rut and feel some despair about it. But don't give up on your dreams. Even if it's a little out there and you're writing music about some steampunk dystopian society, there's always a way to connect with people. There's always a way to share your world and your creativity with others. And there's going to be people out there, maybe not everyone, but there will be people out there who appreciate it and love your passion and love what you do.